Right.
Let's start with that.
I'm doing great. Good to see you.
First of all, I want to thank you so much for coming in to talk about your movie. There's so much I want to get to, and I think that the people that read Collider and watch Collider, they've heard about your movie for a long time. They're familiar because they're cinephiles. They know how movies are made and all the stuff that can happen behind the scenes. Your movie has an interesting story.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to use the term interesting because I saw your film at the Toronto Film Festival, I believe 2 years ago. And since that time, it's, you've done some additional photography, you've re-edited, and the version I recently saw, being honest, was so much better. It just worked for me so much more. So could you sort of talk about, I guess, the long process or what this adventure has been like for you to get your film, which is, again, really good, into theaters?
It was a surreal journey, very painful at times, but ultimately, I had to go. This was the journey of this film. It had to go through. Maybe hopefully it won't be as painful. Right. The next one won't be as painful. But this was the journey of this film, and I'm just really lucky to have been able to rework it and without any of the chaos and any of the notes and just be able to actually do the work and follow through with the film that I saw in my head and the film I intended to make to begin with. And I was able to get there as close as one can, but I really do feel like I gave my best. This is my version. It's the best version I was able to make. And I truly love it, and I'm really proud of it. But to get there was TIFF was a very difficult evening.
Sure, absolutely. Before we go any further, I think some people have seen the trailers, but how have you been mentioning it to friends and family in terms of what the film is about?
The film is I didn't set out to make a movie about electricity after Me and Earl and Dying Girl. But I loved the characters and I loved the themes of the film, of this battle between ego and humility, and a movie about ambition and legacy and immortality. And at the time and still today, I was still working through some themes about mortality that I started to kind of explore in Me and Earl, and I found that there was a piece of them in me, not in intellect or talent or anything like that, but ambition and humility and this fight between them as filmmakers and wanting to make work that lasts, but also wanting to make maybe work that maybe change some minds. And in addition to that, it was this Social Network 1893. It was about the future, not about the past. It was a chance to make a period movie that had a constant energy and a contemporary feel to it, as opposed to something that was stodgy and still. And I thought it was incredibly relevant today with the streaming wars or the double-edged sort of technology. And in the film, you have the light bulb leads to the electric chair, and there's just the dark side of technology and the consequences and the responsibility of those behind it.
Completely. I have so many things I want to get to, but let's first start with your insane cast. When we look at the poster, the UK poster, I should point out, behind us, you can see the faces you put in this movie. It's preposterous how you got all these people in the movie. And even on the side, you have Tom Holland.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So talk a little bit about landing this cast.
Benedict was attached to the movie when I read the screenplay, and he and I remember had a really long Skype. His wife was about to give birth, and he was in London, and I was in LA or Texas, I forget where I was. And we just bonded over, I just explained how I saw the film. And we just bonded over that, and we were in sync, and we decided to move ahead. And then it was just about finding that right kind of rock and roll combination, because you want this film to have a kind of a youthful energy. And Ellen Lewis cast a film with Theo Park, who was based in London, and we were coming up with couples, and the references were always like Jagger and Dylan and Bowie as Tesla, as opposed to lookalikes or anything like that. It was like the spirit of the time. And the first thing she said to me was, Michael Shannon and Catherine Waterston. That's a rock and roll couple. They look great together. And then they both said yes. We met. I met Shannon at a bar in Brooklyn. Catherine and I Skyped, and we just felt everybody was in sync. And Tom,
I just want to ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
You obviously, you're coming off Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, a lot of buzz, people love it, but you're still like a quote unquote new filmmaker. What is it like sitting down with Michael Shannon at the bar, knowing, man, I really want him to be in my movie? Like, are you nervous as you're sitting down with him, or are you sort of like?
I love actors. I absolutely adore actors. So I'm just in awe of what they're capable of doing. And no, I think, I don't know, I think real passion is infectious, I guess. You can't pretend to want someone in a film. You just have to look them in the eyes and then express how you feel. And if they don't sign on, it just wasn't meant to be. But it's not like I'm pretending to want him in the film because someone is telling me to cast someone. It really came from the heart, and I think that speaks for itself, and convince isn't even the right word. You would just want to make something together. That's what it's all about. The movie is about creation and about making things that last, maybe. And so as long as we're in sync, you just get a feel for it, And then Tom, I had known. I had a brief meeting with him once, many years ago after he made The Impossible. And it was him and his mom, because he was still too young. And so he was always someone that I had in mind. And when the role of Samuel Insull was written to the script, it was perfect. 21-year-old British kid who admired Edison, who moved to New Jersey to work for him. It was perfect. And he was the first call, and he had just wrapped Spider-Man.
Right. It's very, his star has only risen since filming this.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that's going to help. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The cast is great. One of the things that I really took away from the film is, even from the very opening scene, like the production design, the way you move your camera, it's all really, I don't want to curse, but effing good. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Talk a little bit about the production design on the film, because you immediately are submerged into this time and era.
It was, but the whole idea was to interpret the time, not to make an exact replica of the spaces. If we would find archival footage, or a lot of this was pre-motion pictures, so still photography, but it was about capturing the spirit of the time. What did it feel like in that moment, which was about looking ahead, not looking back in sepia or black and white, or even though for a moment I did think about doing it in black and white. So first of all, Jan Rolfs is a production designer, and Chung-Un Chung is the cinematographer. Jan designed all the great Peter Greenaway movies, The Cook, the Wife, the Thief, and the Lover. And then Chung, of course, did the original Old Boy for director Park Chan-wook, and he did Me and Earl, and we did like 3 things together now, and he's a real brother, and we just look at each other, we understand what we want out of this movie, which was no rules. That was the rule behind it. There were going to be no rules. And so because everyone was thinking out of the box, and rich colors, and our palette was early experimental color photography. So it was kind of imperfect, but rich and saturated at times. And the movement, even though we designed the film in pre-production, storyboarded it carefully, we would then kind of forget it. It was a draft in the back of our heads. And once we came on set, we try to realize those original ideas and some key movements that get me from one scene to another, and other times just be in the moment with the actors, and at that point we reverted to handheld. It just felt, because it felt right. There was no one saying that we couldn't mix not formats, but mixed dolly or handheld or lens selection. It just whatever felt. And I was always also composing for Mother Nature, who was another character in the film and the ultimate winner of the war. So there's always air around actors at times, and sometimes in extreme ways. And that was just like fun little exercises that we were playing with going into it.
Let's break down actually the very beginning of the movie, which is this great setup of where you have all these lights in a field and all these people coming in. Can you sort of tell people about this specific scene?
Sure.
And a little bit of how you shot it, because it's just really cool.
Yeah, it's the opening of the scene. It's Edison unveiling his new invention. That he captured yet again, light in a jar, the impossible. The elusive. He trapped it yet again, and he's always defying nature, especially when his wife gets sick, and his acceptance of her fate. All that is really something that is a theme that is constant in the film until the very end, when a memory is now captured in a motion picture. But the opening is again, it's Mother Nature begins the story. With the Niagara Falls, and then the night sky with the stars. And then that's interrupted by an extreme close-up of the Westinghouse Railway air brake. Like, industrialization coming in. And that's the introduction really of that character through machinery. And then you find the fat cats, all these wealthy East Coast investors approaching an empty field at night, lit up only by an Edison worker carrying a gaslight and candlelight. Sorry, and you know, so Mother Nature takes over most of the frame with a little train or the fat cats walking in the bottom of the frame. It's kind of an FU that Mother Nature's saying right from the very beginning. I will always win, but try, kind of a thing. Sure. And then once the Edison worker blows out the candle and the fat cats are in the middle of this muddy field, you hear Edison call out to his boys to switch on. To turn the switch on, I guess, and this miraculous field of electric light floods, kind of fills the screen, as like in the introduction of modernism or futurism or whatever it is, and that's our introduction to one of our leads, which is Edison, and then and off he goes to Washington after that to get more money.
What's funny about this, and I want to add this, is that as good as your description was, it doesn't fully convey how cool it looks on film. So I want to just, for the people that are watching, it looks awesome. It's like a great opening to the movie.
It was supposed to be an operatic moment. One of the few moments throughout the film that is, we shot it with a crane, a very specific movement that introduces Edison. I wanted it because it really it tells a lot about the character too, because Westinghouse is a factory man, one of his men. You always see him at either his wife and partner, Marguerite, or as one of the men. And this is Edison as the show. I mean, it's all about him. And it really is a showman. And it's like but it should be spectacular. And then it ends with an overhead of God's point of view before we cut to the title card. Again, Mother Nature's always around. And there's another layer of death and mortality that complements the legacy that they're both focused on in different ways.
So I want to jump backwards, and I want to go back to the Toronto Film Festival, which I'm sure is not the best thing you want to talk about.
It's a lot of PTSD, but go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So what I want to know is, and I think people want to know, is when you showed it there, mm-hmm. from what I understand, and maybe I'm wrong, it was like kind of a rush to make that date or to get that screening done. Is that what actually happened?
Yeah, that's yes. We were rushing to make that deadline, and there was a lot of negotiation and compromise leading up to the cut that was still a work in progress. But I knew before I screened it that I was already off a different track, and the movie that I intended to make was here, and there was a lot of negotiation to get it to a place where I was delusional a bit. I guess I thought because it was a work in progress and the release was going to be about 2 months after the screening, that I would have time to continue fighting and winning and steering it back to where I wanted it to be, and it didn't work out that way.
So I don't want to.
It's okay. We can talk about everything.
No, completely. But so my question is, what was in that version for people that didn't see it that you felt like immediately like, well, this is stuff that I would rather not have in it? Do you know what I mean?
100%. Unearned sentimentality that was forced in, either in voiceover, ADR. Wrong performance takes to soften the fear of being of making Edison unlikable, and when that is part of his character, and that's what makes the conflict so real. And I hope people agree with me that Benedict's performance is so layered and it's so dark. But now that you understand how he thinks and why he's making the choices that he's making, and how ambition is starting to take over, all that was lost and it was softened, kind of neutering the movie, making it quite flat. In addition to that, we were still reworking the music, wasn't there yet, and we shot 5 additional scenes for the U.S. cut, and yet the film is still 10 minutes shorter than would screen there. And scenes just needed time. A couple of things the movie just needed shape. The scenes needed work. When you're noted to death, sometimes you can lose yourself. Any artist sometimes loses yourself, and you just need time to work, just literally to work and not address notes, but to work in silence. have your ideas settle. And I had that time unintentionally, but this was the journey I needed. This is the time I needed for all the ideas to settle and find my way back. And I was lucky enough to get a chance to rework the movie the way I intended.
Well, it's fascinating to me because anyone who's watched my interviews knows I constantly talk about the editing process with filmmakers because it's essentially the final rewrite. And your film is a perfect example of why editing is so important, because I'm one of those few that saw the TIFF cut, and I remember talking to you that night and I don't want to actually say that night, but what I was going to say, that I remember leaving the theater and being like, I see the movie, it doesn't fully work for me.
Yeah.
Like there's something about, like, you know what I mean? But like there was so much good in it. But since you've done the re-editing, I'm like, oh, this is really good. And it's probably because of things that I didn't even realize, which you've mentioned, which is alt takes of Benedict's performance.
I adore actors, and they need time. And this was a very fragile film, and it had an unusual structure as well. And we were trying to make the film and release it within less than a year, which is very hard for a movie like this. It sometimes needs a little more time to find that balance, because you can move a Tesla scene this way and a Westinghouse scene that way, and the movie still kind of works. But there's only one right combination that makes it work the best, and that needed time to sort out. And all the performers needed to tweak and really spend time looking at the footage and finding the right balance to make them feel real.
Totally. So you mentioned you did some additional photography.
Yes.
What did you shoot that added to the movie, and how did it help the film?
Well, it helped. A lot of choices helped the film. Danny Bensi and Julian Saunders wrote an incredible score, and I always wanted the music to be aggressive and loud and have the music be another character. That helps, obviously. That adds another layer and another character you always wanted the film to have, instead of being something stately. We shot 5 new scenes that really clarified the relationship, or help define the relationship between Edison and his wife, Mary, played by Tuppence Middleton, and understand her illness a little better. And that was key. One new scene with Nikola Tesla, where he's fired, and there's a great line that says, you're just an immigrant, which only added and helped and underscored the themes of the fence and that run throughout the film, both the fence that Mary wanted and the virtual fence that Westinghouse speaks of by the end. In addition to that, scenes babies that I lost, that all of a sudden the film that the movie just started to find the right shape, find the right rhythm, and there was a moment where my body just kind of told you at some point, I think this is it. We finally found the right shape of this film, and it's time to let it out, to let it go. And I can still, I'm still trying to get a shot from the second season of Glee for a shot that I didn't get, with the AV kids in the Christmas episode. I'm still trying to get that shot. So I can continue mixing this for as long as you want, but it did feel like this is right. And we started screening it, and the response was different. It was energetic. It was people understood the themes better, the beauty and the dreams and the pathos. So everything just kind of, the pathos, everything just kind of started to click. And at some point, it was ready. And I know that I gave my best.
Completely, but as I said, I'm one of those few that there's only probably a number, like 1,000 people or 500 people, or I don't know how many people were in the theater. Do you know what I mean?
1,000, and it's amazing how that can destroy one. Yeah. One screening can just absolutely be devastating.
Yeah, I mean, but that's why I'm being so proactive about this, because I really enjoyed this new cut.
Thank you.
And so I really do hope people. I do think with this cast that people are going to watch it. I mean, this is just an incredible cast. And once you start it with the production design, you pull into this world, you must have a lot of deleted scenes.
Yeah, I guess so. Uh-huh.
Do you have is there a scene that you were really sad to see go, but it just didn't work for the movie?
Oh, it's a great question. I love those questions myself. But, I lost a couple of scenes for the director's cut of the film that I was holding on to. In fact, you probably saw them, that rhythmically were wrong. And as an experiment, Westinghouse used to have a different introduction at a party, and now he's introduced in a very quiet domestic scene with his wife that is so appropriate to the character as opposed to the more kind of Visconti's The Leopard version of it. Yeah, as beautiful as that was, it rhythmically was wrong. It was beautiful, but thematically and for character purposes, this new version seems like a quiet introduction of this man. After seeing Edison in the field, just seems right. Other than that, there were certain sequences that were much longer. The Southwick Brown, the humanitarian who is proposing that Edison collaborate with him on the electric chair because he's been seeing so much of botched hangings. He had a longer sequence in the botched hanging sequence that I just loved because it was so dark and macabre, and I think a quicker version of that is the right thing for the movie, but the longer one I could live in there forever. Plus, Michael Wilkinson's costumes are amazing. He had this like mauve suede situation and a top hat.
I think I see that. I think I saw that scene, or did I not?
It's always been this compressed version, but there were earlier versions that I could just live in it forever because it's so interesting. He's a beautiful actor, Tom Fisher.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the stuff. Yeah. Anyway, I want to jump into something else, which is your history. You've worked with such gifted filmmakers as a second unit director, as an assistant. And I think a lot of people might not realize. Name, if you don't mind name dropping, but name some of the people you've worked for as like an assistant.
There's a lot of great people. I'm very lucky. I don't know how I got a seat at the table, but people. I left Laredo, Texas, because of Mean Streets and The Gentleman on Your Shirt. Scorsese his movies changed my life when I discovered them on VHS, and I decided to kind of follow his path and go to New York. And Faber and Faber, Scorsese on Scorsese was my Bible, And I ended up working as an intern and then eventually as an assistant to him. And then that led to Thelma Schoonmaker, which leads to Nick Pileggi. Pileggi's married to Nora Ephron, and eventually Nora Ephron gets me into the DGA, shooting second unit for her, which I did until the very end. I was already directing, I think, American Horror, But if she'd call and say, "Do you mind shooting some food inserts for Julie and Julie?" I get on the next flight and just do like the best insert of a duck you've ever seen. and then Ryan Murphy, of course, he saw I did directed second unit for him, some sequences in India and in Bali for Eat, Pray, Love, and his show Glee had just been picked up, I think the back 9 of the first season, and he asked if I wanted to shoot an episode for him. And I assumed it was a one-off, but that became the beginning of my directing career, which led to American Horror Story and eventually my own work.
Yeah,
and also another Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu, who originally I had a friend who knew that he was starting a movie in Memphis, 21 Grams, and he needed a bilingual assistant. They knew I spoke Spanish, and I met with him, and then we hit it off, and then I ended up doing second unit on Babel, and now he's been a great friend and supporter since then.
It's crazy. I mean, literally, your story is the American dream.
It's a lot. I mean, would I have loved to finish, graduate from NYU with like a picture deal at a studio? Yes, my journey was just slower, but I've been so lucky because I've been enriched by these beautiful human beings that just happen to also be the best filmmakers.
But think about it. Like you grew up being a Scorsese fan.
Yes.
And you worked for Scorsese.
Yeah.
I mean, that shit's crazy.
I remember when I went to. I think there was a counselor at what do you call these guidance counselors at
Sure.
NYU. My first week, you had to meet with them, and they said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to work for Scorsese." And he was like, "Every single person around you is here for the same reason." And he just felt like, oh, God, he's right. But I kept trying.
But that's what I mean.
I kept trying to eventually, it's a longer story how I got through in that door, but it's a good one. But I got there.
Right. So you worked with such gifted filmmakers and people. What is it? Is there a similar trait that a lot of these people have that you wanted to take with you for your own work and also just as a person?
Yeah, because you can't copy style. All these filmmakers see the world through their own lenses, and I hope I do too. So it's not about that. And everyone runs their set differently, every one of them. And that's always fascinating to see what works for you, what doesn't work for you. But look, it comes down to humility. It really is that how generous they have been and how humble. Scorsese, as you have a conversation, he'll mention all the masters that came before him, before he says anything about his own work. There's this wanting to expose you to film history, that love of film history and everything that's come before, and that is a part of a great quality of his and Thelma Schoonmaker, and that kind of nurturing. And Thelma has been a guardian angel for the last 20 years in my life, and everybody else has had why Nora brought me into the rehearsals, and why did she force Paramount to get me into the Guild, because she insisted I was the only person that could direct second unit for her. They just had faith, and so it's a quality that I hope I have, and that I hope to be able to pass on.
I definitely want to touch on a series that I'm incredibly looking forward to, is the Amazon series The Hunt, which I believe you directed the pilot.
Yes.
For people that aren't aware, I believe it takes place in the 70s. It's about these people that are going on the hunt for Nazi criminals,
right,
or Nazis.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Okay, so how did you get involved in this series? And this is especially appropriate in today's era.
Yeah, it's I think they're gonna, and this is something you should check before you run this. I think they're retitling it Hunters or The Hunters.
Sure.
Because there's a Blumhouse film called The Hunt.
Yes. Okay.
And I think it's going to be Hunters.
So basically, why don't we just say it's untitled for now?
Untitled for now. But I think they've settled on Hunters, by the way. So Hunters. I was sent a script, and it was hard for me to take on another movie because Current War, I was still re-editing it in my head, and I hadn't been released yet, so no one had ripped it away from me yet. And I was still hoping, and I just needed to make that movie, the version that I saw in my head. So I didn't want to take another film or work on another film, even though I was writing quite a bit. And then when I was submitted a pilot script, which was a feature-length pilot, not a pilot, but the first of 10 episodes, that I met with David Weil, the writer, and Nikki Toscano, who was the exec producer with David. I liked them very much. I liked the material, and very much. And I started to see it in my head, and I had a dream of casting Pacino as Meyer Offerman, one of the leads in the film, and that became real. And so that was one of the highlights of my life, is to be able to collaborate with him and get to know him and work with him.
That's the thing. When you do the pilot, you're very involved in every aspect. So talk a little bit about Logan Lerman and the other people that you put in the show.
That's the great part of directing a pilot, is that you are there from the ground up, and you are assembling with the showrunners the cast and the crew, and in this case rehearsals, and the palette, the color palette, all those choices, and creating a prototype that you hope will survive and last, and one that other directors could take and make their own and interpret it, because they're artists too, but there is a certain direction. And I also got to work with Fred Elms on the pilot, who shot some of my favorite movies of all time for David Lynch, Eraserhead and Blue Velvet, and did The Ice Storm, and all the last few Jim Jarmusch movies. And he's been one of my heroes, and he was available, and we worked together on this pilot. But Jeannie Berlin is in it. Logan Lerman was amazing. Carol Kane, who's unbelievable. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful cast, and it's tonally, I think, a real unique piece. The series is. Is
it one of these things where the rating doesn't really apply, or is it like, how would you describe the tone and what you're going to kind of see on screen?
I don't know anything about ratings or anything like that, and I think they all drop. I think in the winter. It's Amazon, and I'm not aware of what. I
don't think they have a rating on TV, but I'm just wondering more about like tone, and is it one of these things where we're going to see these people like? I guess, how much do you see?
I think you see a lot. I mean, I think it's a fine line between Marathon Man and a graphic novel. So there is some extreme violence, but there is some humor, and there is tonally, it's a challenge because there are flashbacks to concentration camps. So you have to honor the why behind making this project, and also creating something that feels new and unique.
Completely. What have you been? You obviously wrapped on that a while
Yes.
ago. What have you been working on since?
The Hunt. I'm still we're mixing it because it's a feature length pilot, so we're finalizing the mix. And I did.
So it's like an hour and a half to 2 hours.
It's an hour and a half, yeah.
Okay.
And then before that, I did a pilot, the first 2 episodes of a show for Netflix called Chambers with Uma Thurman. That was a lot of fun, and Tony Goldwyn, and a lot of wonderful young actors. Some cast right out of the Native American reservations. It was a really great experience. And now I'm just thinking about the next thing. It's nice to finally let this film go. I'm really proud of it, and it feels like a triumph for the cast and the crew that made it with me. To finally have something out there that, regardless of how it's received, that you did your best and their best work, and I'm really thrilled with it. And I'm just thinking about the next thing. Hopefully it'll be an easier process, but I'm willing to take a chance if it isn't. I know I could survive it.
What's interesting is that you are in the boat of, there's some filmmakers I've spoken to that are like, once it's done, it's done. And I believe you're probably more in the Lucas boat of like, I can still tweak this.
At some point when it's actually released, you know that you did the best under the circumstances and under those conditions, period. That was what I was thinking 2 years ago, and that was a horrible feeling because that was not me. And now it is very much me, and I do move on, but up until it's actually released, I will try to perfect it. And yeah, unless it's that shot from Glee that I will never. It was so easy. It was a shot of the AV kids looking up with the little snow machine with Leah, Michelle singing this Carpenter song. But I'll try to get it someday.
That's so funny.
It aired 8 years ago, I think.
Right. Yeah. It's so funny. Well, listen. For the people watching, I really recommend giving Current War a chance. It
Please.
is October 25th. In select theaters.
It's 1,000 theaters across the nation, and
that means it's everywhere.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah.
It's kind of celebrates the medium that we're using to make it. And there's another story about the creation of motion pictures. So if you're a fan of films, I hope you dig this one.
Thank you so much for coming in the studio.
Thank you.
And thank you all so much for watching.